Now, here's something that I thought I would share with you and that you might find interesting because it's not just history, it's family history. Now, at first, you might be listening to this and thinking on this next part, yeah, but what on earth does this have to do with the Civil War? It doesn't have anything to do with the Civil War. But you'd be wrong because it does. Actually, you'll just have to wait for me to explain it. All right, well, here we go. Now, this picture has some people you should recognize. Uh, there's you at the bottom, and then right above there, there's your mom. It's also got the years that both of you were born. You in 2013 and your mom in 1991. And then above that, there's me, Grandpa Troy, and I was born in 1968. So the arrows point from one generation to the next. So me, I'm the generation on top, and then below me is my child's generation, my child, and then below that is you, your generation. Okay, that's simple enough. Now, here's some people that you don't know. Well, I take that back. You know the guy down there at the bottom. That's me, your grandpa. And going up one generation above that, that's my dad, whose name is Doyle. He was born in 1944. So your grandparents' parents are called your great grandparents. And their parents are your great great grandparents. And then their parents are your great 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 grandparents. And every time you go back a generation, you add one more great on there. Okay, so this may sound confusing, but I'm going to do it anyway because you can handle it. You're smart. You're a smart kid. So you got two parents, and they each have two parents. That means you've got four grandparents, and they each have two parents. That means you've got, let's see, two parents, four grandparents, eight great grandparents, 16 great great grandparents, and 32 great 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 grandparents. Anyway, that's beside the point. The point is, okay, there's your grandpa, that's me, and go up two generations, and my dad's dad, whose name was also Doyle, that's my grandpa and my grandma, okay? All right, so with me so far. Now let's go back another generation. So there's my grandparents at the bottom, Doyle and Ruthie Bell, and that makes them your great great grandparents. Okay, now as I go up from there, I don't have photos to show because I don't have photographs of these other people. But let's take a look at my grandma, Ruthie Bell. Now, up above that is her dad, Jim Bowles. Okay, and his dad was also named Jim Bowles Sr. Jim Bowles Sr., which was my great great grandfather, and therefore your great 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 grandfather, fought in the Confederate Army in the Civil War. Right there and joining up in Overton County, Tennessee, where my dad's family's all from. So he fought in the Confederate Army, and he didn't get killed in the war. He came home. And then looking over at my grandpa, his dad's name was Peyton Smith. Actually, his name was Robert Peyton Smith. He was born in 1867. I never met him. His people called him Pate Smith. So let's take a look then at his parents. Okay, so his dad was named Noah Smith, and Noah Smith was born in 1845, and he married Cynthia Hall, who was 2 years younger than him. She was born in 1847. Noah Smith, who was also my great great grandfather and therefore your great 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 grandfather, also fought in the Confederate Army in the Civil War. Same place, from Overton County. Now, his wife didn't fight in the war. They didn't get married until after the war, right after the war ended. But you'll notice whereas those two great-great-great-great-grandfathers have Confederate flags, I put an American flag for her. That's because even though she also was from Tennessee, which was a southern state, which was a state that joined the Confederacy, her whole family, her parents and her brothers and sisters, they all supported the Union. They did not support Tennessee joining the Confederacy. And she didn't fight in the war, but her father and her brothers did, and they fought in the Union Army. And then I've got this sort of a dotted arrow pointed toward this photograph I do have, which is my great-great-grandmother Cynthia Hull's first cousin, whose name was Tinker Dave Beatty. He was the leader of the group of Union soldiers in the area, and he's one of the most famous Union leaders in Tennessee during that time. So remember how we talked about in the previous video that even though people call it the War of the States because it was the North versus the South, and those states in the South, they left the country to make their own country. Remember how I told you that 1 out of every 3 people living in those states still were loyal to the Union and still wanted to stay in the United States. 1 out of every 3. Well, take a look here at what we're looking at. This is just on my dad's side of the family. We, that is me and you and your mom and my dad too, have 3 ancestors that fought in the Civil War from this same part of Tennessee where I live, and 1 of the 3 fought for the Union and 2 of the 3 fought for the Confederacy. So it kind of matches up with how people throughout the South were. About 1 out of 3 supported the Union. Now, those brothers of Cynthia Hull, two of them didn't live through the war. They got killed in the war. But I've often thought about what would have happened and how lucky we all are that Cynthia Hull's father or her brothers didn't meet Noah Smith while the war was going on and fight with him, because if they had killed Noah Smith, none of us would be here, because none of us would have been born, right? Because our ancestor, Peyton Smith, was born after the Civil War. So if Noah Smith hadn't lived to the end of the Civil War, we wouldn't be here. Anyway, that is kind of a side point. I know that I told you I was about to tell you why the Civil War started and what it was all about. But I thought this would be an interesting little detour to take first, just because it not only helps you learn about the Civil War, it also helps you learn about a little more about Tennessee and about your own family history. All right, well, next I'll work on the one that I said I was going to do about how the war started. All right, I love you.